Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Well, today we want to have another look at the Web DRM proposal because there's a few more things to be added to the conversation that some articles have mentioned, some articles have not. Some of the things are fairly new because the proposal really was underground, and some people actually said, hey, this should never have been on a private employee's GitHub account without a lot of more people knowing about it, because it got a lot of backlash and nobody even knew it was there. But it turns out that this proposal was actually out and being discussed by a few different groups kind of behind the scenes for over a year. So we're going to look at the author's response to a lot of the feedback, and we're going to have a look at a few of the other comments from the web, and we're also going to look at the process of implementation and how that looks going in. And so, of course, to bring you up to speed, I'm going to pull up the explainer here, which we've already mentioned a little bit, but this is where the official information about this web environment integrity, which is being termed as the, quote, Web DRM. Is it DRM? Well, it kind of behaves like a DRM. The basic summary is that you go to a website. If the website is utilizing this API, they're going to tell your browser you need to get verification that you are an authoritative site or an unmanipulated site, or otherwise some site we attest as private, or like not private, we attest as secure or unmalicious or unspammer or unbought. And then when the third party attester comes back, then the information from the website can be passed on. Now, what this means, I saw some people in my comments, of course, this is the third video I'm doing on this topic. Please refer to the first two as well for more information. Some of the people in the comments said, well, this is why I use Firefox. That is true. The problem is that this is not up to the browser to implement. This is up to the web developer to implement. And so if the website, the web developer or the company behind or the website implements this API, you will not be able to interact with that site without this being utilized, which means you're either going to have to, as some people suggest in the comments, Firefox will have a plugin that allows you to pass this. Of course, the hackers will get by it in the first couple of days, and then the rest of us will kind of be left aside, screwed over in the process, being forced to use something like Chrome we would not want to be using. Or we can just refuse to use the services. But let's also not forget that, remember, just about 2 years ago, maybe it was 3 years ago now, the IRS wanted to make sure that everybody is who they said they were, and they were contracting out to a third party that you're going to use ID.me to verify who you are to use anything on the IRS website. And then meanwhile, they went AFK from their phones, and you couldn't interact with the IRS at all without going through their website. Well, then what happened is you were forced to agree to the very, very invasive, very, very horrible privacy policy and terms of service to a third-party private company in order to interact with the official government website, that if you do not interact with them in the proper ways, you go to jail. Well, that sounds a little bit problematic. Now, of course, in response to that, everybody and their laser eyes start focusing on ID.me, and a whole ton of issues with that company were brought to the surface, and then the IRS backed off a little bit. It is now still an optional thing that they really, really, really highly recommend you do, but as of right now, they're not forcing you to use that company yet. And that's the part of the problem, is that if you're not utilizing the service that your required service requires, look at renting. You know, many renters are now trying to say, you have to have an account at this, or we have an account with this, and you have to agree to the terms of service to this to rent an apartment. And this is some unscrupulous third-party company that doesn't care about your privacy. They're a big corporate entity, and you're like, oh, I don't really want to do that. Well, sorry, you got to look for an apartment somewhere else. And with big companies buying up all the apartment complexes, you really don't have a lot of options. Very interesting things going on in our world. All of these start with the idea behind the web integrity, web environment integrity platform that is being proposed on Rupert Benweiser's private GitHub account. So this is not a Google account, but it is actually, we're going to be looking at the implementation. This is actually roadmap for upcoming versions of Chrome. And we're going to look at that. But this is just the basic overview. Of course, I've overviewed it briefly in my other 2 videos on this as well. So we're not going to take the extra time here to review it. I'm going to refer you to those videos. Both of those will be linked down in the comments here. What I wanted to do is focus on a few different things. If you get down to the very bottom, there's a reference and acknowledgement. Many thanks for valuable feedback and advice. I didn't see anybody else posing this, but I was like, oh, let me read through this whole page and click through. Well, this is over on a GitHub anti-fraud page. And this is, look at the date. This is over a year ago. So this is April in 2022. This was opened to discuss on the anti-fraud the idea of measuring the integrity through the browser. And again, the idea here is that if your web browser, or it's not just your web browser though, they're looking at other information. They're looking at your web browser. They're looking at your operating system. They're looking at your basic behavior. They're utilizing a lot of things in the background that are major privacy violations in order to do this. And way back over a year and a half ago, they were already discussing this once again in some place that none of us were really thinking about looking at. And so it seems like it's feeding to this idea that this stuff is being spread through the back end in such a way that it's kind of out of the radar of most people. But they say here Chrome proposes developing a high-level document to capture use cases and requirements for device attestation and other high-fidelity, low-entropy signals. So high fidelity and low entropy in this case would be things you don't really know is happening in the background, but has a lot of trust to Google. Tells me something I don't really want that. All right, this calls for collaboration among interested members of the anti-fraud community group to identify important signals for invalid traffic detection and other relevant security use cases. So they want to look for signals for invalid traffic. Now, I'm going to say that I'm seeing elements of this being used in some way, not necessarily in this form, but in some cases. Look, for example, PayPal. So my main web design business still has a PayPal account, and all I do with it is I log in and I send out invoices. I don't use it to pay for anything. I don't use PayPal for anything I don't have to. And there's technical reasons why I have the PayPal account for doing basic online invoices. The problem I have is I've had times where I go to log into PayPal and it's like, we can't log you in. Well, it was not allowing me to copy and paste information out of my password manager. So I had to manually type the passwords, which was very interesting. And then it got to the point where I'm manually typing the passwords and it would still lock me out. So I couldn't access my PayPal account. Well, I switch computers and I go back to my containerized computer I use for banking. I can log into PayPal there all day long. Yet it's on the exact same computer, just that same exact computer running a different operating system. Why is it with the same information I can log in on the one account and I can't log in on the other? It is the same account. It is the same hardware. It is a different software package. It is the same browser. PayPal is doing something that even though I am entering the correct username and the correct password, it will lock me out of my account on my one operating system, but not in the other. And they're both based on Ubuntu. One is an Ubuntu Linux Mint, and the other one is a really old, needs updated Linux Ubuntu-based Peppermint 10, which I really want to update, but I don't really want to update it without knowing what's going on, because right now that's the only reliable computer I have that can access my PayPal account, which, by the way, I have to log in by copy and pasting passwords out of text files. Fortunately, that whole operating system is very obscure and very encrypted, so I'm okay with that in that use case scenario. But what type of weird invalid traffic detection is PayPal doing that's locking me out of my account when I manually type into a web browser, an up-to-date modern web browser on a modern operating system, my username, my password, and it locks me out? But I do the same thing on the same hardware on a different operating system, and it allows it through. It does not make any sense, but they're doing some form of invalid traffic detection, and they're detecting that one computer is invalid traffic, which is simply Linux Mint on a Firefox. And that particular computer is allowing cookies. It's allowing all the weird stuff because I have to for some of the things that I do on that computer, which is why I don't use it for a lot of other things. It's just weird. But that's what we're seeing here is PayPal is picking up something in Linux Mint that is saying this is fraud. And I don't know what. And of course, you can't contact PayPal and ask them about it either. Many modern platforms have built-in tools to help differentiate legitimate and emulated devices. Android provides application for the SafetyNet API, and Apple's App Attest offers the same protection. So this is basically what this is. So if you're unfamiliar with what's going on here, if you have many banking apps and you have a rooted Android phone, you cannot use the banking app on the rooted Android phone because the SafetyNet API triggers that the phone is rooted and it shuts down the banking app. They assume a rooted phone means malware. Well, that's not the case. A rooted phone means I have freedom over my device. And so the companies now are not allowing you to utilize your device to access their services. Well, if that's the only bank I have, now they're telling me what device I have to have, and you have to have a locked down device under the pure control of whatever company owns that device, not me, in order to access the service. Well, this proposal for the web environment integrity is literally this for the global internet at large. It moves it off of the Android and off of the Apple ecosystem and onto the web at large. And that is what the big problem is. By transmitting signals of legitimacy from the device's platform, such as if the device is emulated or rooted, publishers and their technology partners could use this information in part to determine if traffic is invalid. They could then choose appropriate actions like flagging advertising actions as suspicious or requiring more information for sensitive actions like logins or financial transactions. These signals could be open for all websites to consume and could additionally facilitate a variety of other security use cases in privacy-compliant manner. Now, they pretend this is a privacy-compliant manner. The problem is it requires extensive footprinting and understanding of your environment, and that is anything but privacy-honoring by its fundamental overarching nature. So we would like to forward the most useful integrity signals on each platform and provide a unified representation to websites and applications. There are many open questions in this area we'd like to explore. Would a platform signal attesting the device's legitimacy be a useful addition? What integrity signals would be most useful? For example, the device booted from a manufacturer-signed firmware. Like Secure Boot with Windows. You're going to be forced to use Windows. That's exciting. Browser runtime integrity checks. Is this browser from some official source, or is it modified? Does it have an extension we don't like? Look at, for example, the dreaded K-word. Sorry, I can't say that media player's name on the Tubies because I literally keep on getting community strikes for talking about a software application that is available to install and use through the Google Play Store. But on that thing, if you seek help with a problem and you have an unauthorized plugin installed on that, they will not help you until you provide a detailed log illustrating that you do not have any unauthorized plugins. Very interesting, but that's kind of what's going on. Okay. Would an ideal implementation reduce but not eliminate the need for fingerprinting? What remaining needs would require for fingerprinting? For example, enforcing uniqueness. That sounds very privacy invading. Sign-up protections, cookie theft prevention. Okay, which, by the way, Google, the leader of this, Google and Microsoft seem to be the big targets for, is it proxy? I forget the name of it. Is it the evil proxy, I think? This is literally the malware through phishing campaigns that is going around the internet right now, that if you are tricked by it, it is going to steal all your two-factor authentication tokens, and people can clone your entire browser over there. So clearly, their protections of 2FA is not actually solving these problems. This is far more about making sure you are who you are so we know exactly who we're pushing ads to. And that's the argument a lot of people are saying about this, that even though it's being pushed as being an open thing, what is the case? So what other signals derived from common fingerprinting like browsers could surface in a privacy-safe manner. For example, geo time since the state cleared. What additional longitudinal signals should the browser play a role here at all? How do we experiment with new signals for changing threat landscape? What would be useful on platforms that do not have comprehensive attestation framework? Okay, and then potential challenges. How do we maintain equitable access to the web for users with older devices or platforms which may not provide this signal? Should we introduce some noise or hold back the signal on some fraction of devices to prevent over-reliance on these signals? And will the threat actors shift to using valid devices that provide these signals? And what will the additional cost of attacks cause only temporarily reduce fraud? How soon will these signals become stale over time? So that is really what is behind their goals. And this, again, was going out a year and a half ago, completely under the radar of most people. There's a lot of responses to this. We're not going to read any of those right now. You can find this at the bottom of the official GitHub page. Pretty much everything here is linked from the official GitHub page, so we're not going to provide all the individual links. This one's at the very bottom of the page, so we'll go ahead and include just that. Now, the Ben Weiser responds, and this is what the response is. Hey everyone, thank you for your patience and thank you to everyone who engaged constructively. It is clear based on the feedback we've received that a bigger discussion needs to be taken place, and I'm not sure my personal repository is the best place to do it. We're looking for a better forum and we'll update when we have found one. We want to continue the discussion to collaborate and address your core concerns in an improved explainer. So this is good. Okay, let's get off of the personal GitHub and move somewhere else over. And by the way, this is issue number 28, simply called Don't. So this is where this is going to be found. All right, so I want to be transparent about the perceived silence on my end. In the W3C process, it is common for individuals to put forth early proposals for new web standards and host them in a team member's personal repository while pursuing adoption within a standard body. My first impulse was to jump in with more information as soon as possible, but our team wanted to take in all the feedback and be thorough in our response. Of course, that's not the case. This is kind of like WordPress. If you go and look at WordPress, the Gutenberg plugin, reviews, they are overwhelmingly 1 star, and they were far before WordPress crammed Gutenberg as the default and exclusive editor into the WordPress core. It was exclusively 1. The people did not want to hear how to improve it. They wanted to hear how great it was. Everybody who come in and said, hey, we're not looking to improve it. It is a bad implementation. It needs completely scrapped. And what the WordPress guys would do is they just like, well, we don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear it at all. All right. And so what they're going to do is they just decided they're going to push ahead with it and just force it on everybody. Agencies like mine, we've dumped WordPress for every case except if it's the last option because I'm not messing with it anymore. We can get around it. I have just 4 lines that I put in every custom theme file that completely overrides that nonsense, but we don't know exactly how long that is going to continue to work. That's part of the problem. And so they're doing the same thing here. They don't really want to take it. They still want to figure out how to cram this in. They just don't necessarily want to hear everybody's feedback. That's my upfront perspective. It might be a little bit more pessimistic, but I'm fairly pessimistic when it comes to Google and wanting to take control of things on the web. Color me pessimistic if you would like, but I'd rather be pessimistic and maintain autonomy over life in the internet in the modern age, rather than turn back and now that it's way, way, way too late, no return. Okay, we need to approach these things more cautiously than we need to dive right into it. I don't know. I could say more things about that, but I don't want to get too far off the track here. But he says, that being said, I did want to take a moment to clarify the problems our team is trying to solve that exist on the web today and point to key details of this stage early in the proposal. All right. So web and environment integrity's goal is to make the web more private and safe. Total nonsense. Remember, this is a Google employee, and he is sitting here saying, we're all about privacy. Google is not about your privacy. The entire principle that Google has is to collect as much data as conceivably possible and then figure out ways to monetize it. This is not just some old model. They've just shifted some of their messaging to say they're being more private. They're not. If this were private, why in the world are you forcing phone numbers to verify IDs? Why is it if I want to get the cute little YouTube badge, I need to provide an ID? Why is it that they are caring all the more to authentically verify everybody that's out there? That's not privacy honoring. It's not privacy honoring at all. Okay, the experiment was part of a larger goal to keep the web safe and open from discouraging cross-site tracking and lessen the reliance on fingerprinting for combating fraud and abuse. Let me make sure before we dive into this further. As far as safety, I think this does appear to be a goal, because there is a lot of cost when hackers compromise your systems. I completely get that. It is not for privacy. This is for security. Remember, privacy and security are antitheses of each other in many ways. Okay, the founding of this country. He who gives up privacy for security deserves neither. Okay, one of the opening statements, sometimes attributed to Ben Franklin, sometimes attributed to other people. Sometimes they say it's the essence of what he said, but not exactly what he said. I don't have the exact quote and where it was said in front of me, but that's the essence of it. Privacy and safety are a little antithetical, and I would rather lean towards the area of privacy, especially when good privacy honoring security do exist, such as YubiKeys. You get YubiKeys to use two-factor authentication. This is safe from a SIM swap attack. Really, the only way you could get in is if I lose this key or somebody steals it. That's a good way to breach into the account. Of course, you have a few of these. You tie a few of these onto your account, so if you lose one of them, you can always get in with the other one, clear the other codes out. I find most people still do not even know what that is, even though that is the most secure and the most private way of accessing a lot of these accounts and verifying who you are. Because it's very private, I did not register who I am with YubiKey. They don't know I am the owner of that key, but that key will work on any service that allows it to be used. And so if this were all about privacy and security, you'd be forcing that and educating the whole world about it, and everybody would have them, and it would be against the law to have a central repository of who owns which ones. Okay, that would be the best for both worlds. All right, so what they're saying is they want to discourage tracking and lessen the reliance on fingerprinting and combating fraud and abuse. Now, I'm going to point out, what this requires is that your web browser goes to some quote-unquote third-party attester server to verify what exactly? To verify who you are. And that's going to look at the browser. It's going to look at the operating system. It's going to look at other things it knows about this system. It's going to look at the IP addresses. There's a lot of stuff in here. In fact, we're going to cover, we covered on the Weekly News Roundup, in fact, an article. No, actually, I think I threw it out. It was in my Weekly News Roundup, but I threw it out because I had too many articles in that area. There is a malware server. It's a redirect server system that it's working. One of the things it does is it does an initial fingerprinting. And if you're part of a virtual machine, which are often used for testing, or using a VPN, it kicks you out back to the regular website. But if you're part of a residential IP address block and on a standard Windows system, it forwards you onto the malware server because it assumes, well, you're just a regular user. You'll be more susceptible to the malware than a security researcher, and we don't want them knowing what we're doing anyway. And that's exactly what this system is doing. It's that attestation server in the middle. The question is, who owns that attestation server? It's not going to be some private, independent third party that's not storing any data. I promise you. It's going to be Google, or as Vivaldi suggests, it's going to be Google. It's going to be Apple. It's going to be Microsoft, or it's going to be Canonical. Okay, that's what we get. Fraud detection and mitigation techniques often rely heavily on analyzing unique client behavior over time for anomalies, which involves a large collection of client data from both human users and suspected automated clients. Privacy features like user agent reduction, IP reduction, preventing cross-site storage, and fingerprint randomization make it more difficult to distinguish or re-identify individual clients, which is great for privacy, but it means fighting fraud more difficult. This matters to users because making the web more private without a new API to developers could lead websites for adding more sign-ins to gain access to basic content. And we're starting to see that with like New York Times and other news sites want us to have an account to, that might be more of a money grab, who knows. Invasive user fingerprinting, which is less transparent, or extensive challenges, SMS verification, or CAPTCHAs. You know, if you just educate the world about how to use one of these, won't be a problem. I've just proved I'm the same person accessing this as the last page load. I get the problem. This is a solution. Why are you not training people to use this? Now, of course, do we want to use that plugin on every single site? No, but going behind the paywall on a bank. But why does my bank not know? Why does my banking security company not know that this is a thing? Good question. All of these options are detrimental to users' browser experience, either by increasing or decreasing browsing friction or significantly reducing privacy. I completely agree with that statement. We believe this is a tough problem to solve, but very important one that we will continue to work on. We will continue to design, discuss, and debate in public. Now, before we move on to the next part, the big problem I have with this is that, sure, it might have the intention of locking and securing the browser on the very small back end, but we have a few fundamental problems. Fundamental problem number one is that companies are going to start pushing that everywhere. Look at how many companies are now like, hey, would you like to share your location with yourdomain.com website? No, I really don't. Or all of the notifications. Would you want notifications? No, they're just going to start throwing this stuff everywhere because partly is that people don't understand what it does and what it doesn't do. It's like, oh, this is more secure? Okay, we'll have it. And they won't know the difference. They'll just cram it in. Look at how many health-focused companies are using TikTok and Facebook tracking pixels, which is becoming a violation. It's all being proposed in amendments to HIPAA and amendments to other laws in here in the United States about being careful not to have these tracking pixels on the login, at least logged in portions of websites where you can figure out, because those tracking pixels, you can literally de-anonymize a person down to the individual. I've demonstrated before how or mentioned before how we do it. Okay, web environment integrity is not designed to single out browsers or extensions. Our intention is to provide browsers with an alternative from the above checks to make it easier for users to block invasive fingerprinting without breaking safety mechanisms. The objective is to provide a signal that a device can be trusted, not to share data signals about browser or device. The problem is that's how it will be used. That may not be your intention, but that is how it will be used because that's how everything is right now being used. Another proposal right now by the FTC is to say, hey, these data miners can't sell certain types of data. I think they should just ban the industry altogether because why do we have third parties that are buying and selling our data for their profit without our knowledge or consent? That's another thought we could think about. Maintaining users' access to an open web on all platforms is critical. The problem is this breaks the open access because you now require a third-party attestation server in order to figure out who you are. We're going to go through these ones a little bit quicker here. We're already about 30 minutes into this video. So we had proposed it prevents ecosystem lock-in through holdbacks. That is an utter lie. Okay, we got to read this one. We had proposed a holdback to prevent lock-in at the platform level. Essentially, some percentage of time, say 5 to 10%, web integrity, environment integrity attestation would intentionally be omitted and would look the same as if the user had opted out. So they're trying to say at some point in time, 5 to 10% of the requests, it's just going to pass through no matter what. So 5 to 10% of the times, if you have 100 cases of fraud coming in per 1,000, so 1%, you're going to let 0.5 to 1% of those fraud cases through automatically. And the idea here is to say, well, this just assumes that some people were saying that we're not using it, we're not locking it out. So in other words, you just keep on refreshing your page 100 times, you might still get it. A little pithy, but kind of like Tor. If you're on Tor and you find a site that's blocking Tor or blocking your specific IP address, just hold that, spam that Shift Control L until you find one that your particular IP is not blocked. All right. This is designed to prevent web environment integrity from becoming, quote, DRM from the web. See, we have a mechanism to make sure this isn't DRM for the web. Any site that attempted to restrict the browser access based on the signals alone would also have restricted access to a significant enough proportion of devices to disincentivize the behavior. That's a good thought. It sounds great and it looks neat in a proposal. The problem is it is not going to happen. Okay. Additionally, this could be clarified to the explainer more that this is an opportunity for developers to use hardware-backed attestation as alternatives to CAPTCHAs and other privacy invasive integrity checks. So again, this is up to the developers. The problem is there's very few companies that are using highly competent, highly qualified developers. Most companies hire developers that don't know what they're doing. They'll either cram this stuff in, they'll implement it wrong, or they'll just say, well, this is just our standard package, we're going to do it. And before you know it, you have to have a certain web browser on a certain operating system on a certain vendor in order to enter the basic public-facing site, because that's how the web works. Trust me, I spent a lot of my career as a web developer fixing the mistakes of really poor web developers, because I actually do know what I'm doing. All right. It does not disadvantage browsers that spoof their identities. That's possibly true. However, it will disadvantage browsers that seek to anonymize the entire OS or other factors. Let's work together on finding the right path. So that is really what his approach is. We got to work together, just like the WordPress guys. Let's figure out how to make this right. So I love this. Constructive involvement is not ethical when the goal is harmful. Amen to that. Issue number 66 on his post here. I see we're going hard on the idea that building things is always superior to not building things. It's literally better for you to do nothing instead of to continue to work on the proposal. There is not a small change that will improve this. It's a dispute in the overall nature of the product. So they're basically what these guys are saying here is stop saying, let's figure out how to make this work, and recognize the fact this is an abominable nightmare that just needs to be stopped. And of course, we have our pithy responders. Don't listen to those ad blocking addicts. Please ship this ASAP. The ad blocking virus is currently spreading, and we all know it makes people unhappy because people need to watch at least 250 ads per day to be happy. Ad blockers interfere with this, and it's not hard to see their detrimental effects on mental health. Ads make people so happy they literally love them, but unfortunately that horrible ad blocking addiction prevents people from watching them. We all know this is a disaster which needs to be addressed immediately. In order to break free from the ad blocking addiction, users need help, and that help should be provided by their devices. Fortunately, mobile devices are well built for this purpose. Their locked bootloader, trust zone, Android, iOS, system design, safety net are their technologies give us the hope we need. But even on mobile devices, currently the addiction still finds a way. It forces the victims to install alternative browsers such as Firefox, shame on you, which even promote the worst extension ever made, uBlock Origin, which is criminal. You can read the rest of this yourself. Great. Of course, this the authors of this are going to say, well, web environment integrity is not based on ad blocking, but the reality it is. This is to make sure that you are using the full-fledged authorized system. If you're not using the full-fledged authorized system, it's going to kick back a failure. And if you're using that full-fledged authorized system, you are fully involved in the ad data collection scheme. That is what this is about. We're already 35 or so minutes in, but I want to go ahead and talk about where the progress is at to this. And so over here, this is a conversation, Google Groups, intend to prototype web environment integrity API. So this is, of course, going to be an API. And this is the basic, the explainer just goes back to the basic page we were on. This is the explainer page. So how it works, all that kind of stuff. Specification, we do not have specification yet. However, we expect to publish it in the near future for both the considered implementation options for the web layer in an initial spec, which we suspect are not very controversial. They're wrong about that. It's already controversial. And an explanation of our approach for issuing tokens, which we will expect to spark a more public discussion. But it is not directly a web platform component. We are gathering community feedback through the explainer before we actively develop the specification. So, of course, yes, they're going to implement it. There's a Blink component listed over here. These are those two Blink components. Two bugs listed, web environment integrity, user opt-out. This will return an error when the user has disabled an anti-abuse content setting called auto-verify. So one of the factors here is we need to figure out how to make sure that the thing will automatically verify unless you explicitly opt out. And the other one is web environment integrity handle partitioning, bug to track the final decision and implementation. So this is just saying, hey, this is just here to track the implementation of this. Both of these are found over here on this Blink list. We'll wait for that to load and then we'll pull it up. I want a slow internet connection where I'm at right here. Not there yet. Almost. So, there it is. So, oh, come on. There it goes. Okay, so these are the Blink and Blink identity, and you'll find these down right here. These are the two we looked at right here. So those are the two we pulled out. Here's the user opt-out and the handling partition, and it just wanted to load one of those up. All right, so there's that. Here's our initial public proposal. Oh, I did not look at the initial. Oh no, that's the anti-fraud page. That's this one here. Proposals issue 8. This is so their page, their Google group for the initial public proposal is not even on this private GitHub. It's not on Chrome's GitHub. It is on the anti-fraud's GitHub. Is their initial public proposal. All right, so the risks, we're currently working on the explainer and specification, working with the anti-fraud community group to work towards consensus across the web community. The attester is a platform specific, so this feature needs to be included on a per platform basis. We're currently targeting mobile, Chrome, and WebView. So mobile Chrome, Android on Chrome is going to be your first implementation of this. So keep an eye out. That is your canary in the coal mine. With, I guess, proper mention that Canary would be the name of the Chromium builds for testing. So now notice what they say here, which is not mentioned elsewhere except by Vivaldi. A tester is platform specific, so the feature needs to be included. So what does it mean that it's platform specific? Very interesting. Ergonomics, how do we use it in the explainer, security challenges and threats to address of the explainer, and that will be supported on all 6 Blink platforms: Windows, Mac, Linux, Chrome OS, Android, and Android WebView. Initial support only for Android platforms, Android and Android WebView. This feature requires the attester backed by the target platform, so we require active integration on the platform. So if you're using Android, there is an attester for Android. I wonder who that might be. Maybe it could be the guy that owns Android. Just a thought. And then, of course, this is the basic overview, motivation stuff, and all the bugs. So that's where you're going to get all of your information. Overall, this is still a really bad thing. And they're trying to code it up. They're trying to water it under the bridge. And they're trying to kind of let things calm down so they can slowly roll this out without people seeing it. We got to keep this on the forefront, make sure that we are aware of the issues, and just keep on this. Fortunately, we have a lot of allies in that Brave and Vivaldi and Firefox are not behind this, so that gives a pretty good push. So also keep checking out their channels to see what they're saying about this as this moves towards implementation, and a warning to people using exclusively Android on things. This is going to be your first market, specifically through the Chrome browser. So if you are using Android, you might want to consider a shift to something like Firefox or Brave or some other browser on Android so that you can get around this. Of course, I use Firefox Focus explicitly because that browser, I think it's Firefox, I think it's called Firefox Clar and Firefox Focus. So the same browsers, one of them is in the app stores and one of them is on F-Droid and individual repositories. I forget which one's which. But the reason I like that particular one is it lacks all of the extra hardware to interact with the cameras and the microphones and the GPS. It basically is a very, very locked down, secure private browser. You can't use it for things like Jitsi or anything else that you need microphones, cameras, or GPS to use your web browser for. But you can use the regular Firefox for that if you need those services as well. So there's what we have for you today. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.
Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.